on the road again. We can't wait to get on the road again. Telling stories to our family and our friends. We can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. We can't wait to get on the road again. Telling stories to our friends. We can't wait to get on the road again.
Welcome to our monthly AAA podcast, Affinity, Allie, and Annette on the road to good storytelling with your hosts, Allie Spooner and
All right. Well, I'm Allie Spooner. I also write with Affinity Rainbow Publications, and I've got numerous titles out. I jump from genre to genre, from anywhere from romance to paranormal. I've got a lot of different series that are, and some standalone books. I hope you enjoy our podcast and have an opportunity to meet some new authors that are new to you or to learn more about your favorites. We appreciate your support and invite you to visit Affinity Rainbow Publications to check out our books.
And I'm Annette Maury, also with Affinity Rainbow Publications. I'm not going to go into the spiel, the introduction of myself, because you've heard it before. Suffices to say that I really enjoy doing these podcasts and I enjoy writing. I think I'm getting close to 35 books now. So, woo, there we go.
Yeah. All right. Well, each month we'll invite a special guest or guests to join us as we discuss various topics of interest to writers and readers. We'll invite our guests to do a short reading and then follow with the questions on the featured topic, while encouraging them to do at least one giveaway to our audience.
And this month we'll be talking about sapphic romance within a reality TV setting. Whew, with our special guest. I'm so excited about this, Nicole Pyland, very prolific writer. And she wrote, I just reread it again because I read it before and I sort of remembered it, but I wanted to sort of brush up a little bit. So I reread it and I really enjoyed it the second time. Her memorable novel, Reality Check.
That's funny. I had to reread it myself for
Yeah,
the.
I know,
It's been a
right?
minute since I wrote it, so I had to kind of go.
Right?
I didn't reread it. I skimmed, but yeah, I reread it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that, you do series, right? Sometimes I think a bunch of
Yeah. So I think the majority of my books fall into different series, but this is one of my standalone novels.
This is one of your standalone, but yeah, I mean, have you had to reread books in your series because you didn't want to get the details wrong? I have had to do that. And the next book,
I think because I write so quickly, no, for the majority, because we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, but I'll plot them out. But there was one instance because I wrote two standalone books that I connected, and then I later came back and added two more books to that. So I did have to reread those first two, and then reread like certain sections to make sure the continuity wasn't wrong, because my editor wife would not be happy if I got the continuity wrong. So I did do that, but most of them I write them pretty quickly, so I don't have to.
Yeah, that prolific thing about you.
Right. I don't feel prolific. I really don't, but I'll take it, I guess.
Absolutely. So following our podcast, we'll upload to a newly created YouTube channel and hope you consider subscribing so you never miss a future podcast.
And I have the honor and pleasure of introducing Nicole. Nicole Pyland is a best-selling author of lesbian romance novels, including No After You, All the Love Songs, and the series like Chicago, San Francisco, Tahoe, Sports, Boston, and more. Since 2017, she's published over 30 novels, not including her What Happened After shorts, and more books are on their way. Nicole grew up in Indiana studying English and film, and then getting an MS in behavioral analysis and moving to California, working by day as a head of training at a startup. She lives with her wife and their opinionated cat, who spends his evenings helping her write stories by occupying half the chair. I have to hear more about this opinionated cat later. I will ask.
You might hear from him directly. He's right outside the door. So
I have several. I have more than one opinionated cat.
Then you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah. We have fur babies that frequently make appearances during our podcast.
Aw.
It's like,
I fully support that. In my work meetings, I used to fully, anybody that had the dog or the cat in their lap, I was just this the whole time.
I
yeah,
know.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So without further ado, you're on, Nicole. Take us away.
I actually have the book this time. I normally just read from my phone, but my wife brought me the paperback. I didn't even realize we had it in the house because
All
sometimes I
right.
don't know. Okay, so can I tell a little bit about what section, like where this
Absolutely.
is?
Set it
Okay,
up.
Absolutely.
this is in sort of the middle of the book. Basically, the setup is there's these two characters, obviously amongst other characters, who are on a reality competition show. So I chose a short section of kind of one of the challenges to give people an idea of what they would be
Good.
reading about. So
Yeah.
hopefully, so I'll get started here. I'm not going to do voices if anybody's expecting grandiose voices, not from me, but as I said on the beach, today's challenge and trial are both about the mind. Callie and Celeste, you will each be locked in your own cage. The cage has 5 locks. 10 keys are scattered in the sand beneath your feet and tied to parts of the cage. Each key also has a clue tied to it. Read the clues. If you can find and solve the right one fast enough, you can use it to unlock all 5 of your locks at once. The first one out of their cage wins, Ryan explained. Well, this was it. She was in her first trial and would likely be eliminated. She had made some money though, so that would have to be enough. Callie climbed inside the person-sized cage and waited for Ryan to say go. When he did, she instantly reached to untie the first key she could get her hands on. Read the clue first, Callie, Dayton shouted. What? Read the clue. If it's not worth it, don't waste time untying it. Oh, right, Callie said, through her nerves. The answer is red, she said to herself, knowing the riddle because she'd heard it before. Red, I need a red key. There are at least 3 of those. I can see them from here. And there are some in the sand, so it's not that clue, Dayton explained. Callie, find another one. Don't look at the red keys. Callie slid her feet around in the sand as her hands worked above them. She felt something at her left foot, reached down, and pulled it up to read the small card tied to the key. When you have to unlock something, but a code isn't what you need this thing that's on a ring, which has been cut but doesn't bleed, Callie read out loud. It's a key. The clue is a key, but they're all fucking keys, she said a little louder than she'd intended. How many of them are on rings? Dayton asked from her spot behind the railing. Fuck you, Dayton, Celeste flipped her off. Callie looked in Dayton's direction as the woman explained. The key rings. How many of the keys have rings? Oh, Callie said, and glanced at the 6 she could see easily. None of them. Dig, Dayton replied, pointing at the sand. Callie knelt in the sand and started digging for the 4 other keys. Celeste had already unlocked 2 locks just by finding the right keys. There was a risk in Callie's strategy to find the one key that could unlock them all, but there was no turning back now. She pulled another key from the sand, looked at it, saw no ring, and did the same with more until the 9th key. That one had a ring on it. Callie found the closest lock and slid the key in just as Celeste had opened her 3rd lock. That lock released. Then Callie heard the sound of the other locks doing the same thing. So she yanked the one on the door to the cage off and rushed out of the cage. Callie is our winner, Ryan yelled. A moment later, Dayton and the rest of the cast ran onto the trial stage. Dayton reached for Callie and hugged her. Callie let her, and she probably let her hold on a little too long, but she couldn't help it. It felt good hugging Dayton. Thank you, she said to Dayton for saving her again. You would have figured it out on your own. I just didn't want to risk it, Dayton replied, winking at her. Why me? She asked, knowing the camera was right there in their faces. Celeste is kind of a bitch. I heard that, Celeste said, from her spot inside the cage until the locks released on their own. Vince, I could have used a little help, she told the guy she'd hooked up with. Sorry, he shrugged. Callie felt very lucky in that moment. She might have still managed to pull it off, but Dayton's help had made it all but a guarantee, and that meant the world to her. The end. That's the end of, I'm just kidding. That's not the end of the book.
Very good. I'm serious when I said I really enjoyed it. It's a very fun novel. I don't know
Thank
about you, but I never really got into reality TV except for, did you ever watch the original? You might be too young for this, but the original Survivors. Did you watch those, Allie?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Survivor series, the very first one, that was a long time ago. I think that was the
Yeah.
first reality TV series that was kind of big, that made reality TV what it is.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I recently saw this other show, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that I got into any kind of reality TV after that first Survivor, which I thought was kind of interesting. Are you reality TV fans or no?
I think I first got exposed to reality TV before it was called reality TV, but it wasn't. It was Real World and Road Rules on MTV. Were sort of like the first Real World was sort of like the first reality TV show. And then later you started to see these competition shows. So
Yeah.
you would see like Real World Road Rules Challenge, and they would, do these types of battles together. And I do remember I watched the first season of Survivor. That was brutal. I
It
remember them being
was brutal.
brutal to each other.
I know.
And and that was pretty much it on Survivor for me. But I grew up kind of with the Real World and Road Rules challenges, and once they started to get the cameras are there and they're just faking stuff for the cameras, I stopped. I don't really watch too much anymore. But
Yeah. And yeah, and you had some, you had some of that in your book where
yeah,
where you talked about, them making it, zeroing in on particular scenes that would really play to the audience. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's all about the ratings. Yeah.
It is.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, Annette, are you ready to read from your latest, The Love
I
Demand?
am. And just a little background on this. So, like I said, that I hadn't really watched much of reality TV for years and years and years. And then this advertisement came on. I don't really watch a whole lot of TV, but I caught this advertisement for this show, this reality show, this new reality show called The Ultimatum, which was the queer version. And I thought, now this is a fascinating little reality TV show. And I thought, well, this would make an interesting book. So if anybody's watched The Ultimatum, you'll get a sense for the theme. It's not challenges, it's not physical things. It's about all these couples who get together, and one of them wants to get married and the other doesn't. And so they have to figure out, are they, after the end of the show, are they going to get married? Are they going to find another wife, on the show? So they swap them out. So you have to live with somebody else for 3 weeks as a married couple. Or are you going to go away and say, okay, if she's not going to marry me and I didn't fall in love with somebody else, I'm going to be single again. So that's the premise of The Ultimatum. So that's what I based my book on, because I just thought it was so fun and funny. So I'm going not in the beginning, but not too far ahead. This is sort of the beginning. This is when the second main character point of view comes into play. Holy shit, Jamie thought. She suspected they would select attractive couples to participate in the first ever queer version of The Love Demand. But as she looked around the room, the only words that came to mind were lesbian royalty. Jamie could almost see the drool dripping from the corner of her partner's mouth. She was definitely enjoying this a lot more than Jamie. Sabina had been the one to suggest they try this after they'd hit an impasse in their discussions on marriage. Jamie had reluctantly agreed because that was what she always had done. Whatever Sabina wanted, Sabina got. It was Jamie's fault for not asserting herself more. It made little sense because she never let the men in her school push her around, even if they were technically her bosses. But at home, she felt like a doormat. That was what love did to a person. And if nothing else, Jamie was crazy in love with Sabina. An attractive blonde looked as uncomfortable as Jamie, but the gorgeous woman sitting next to her, who wasn't even trying to hide her admiration for Sabina, seemed custom made for this forced reality show. Jamie could hardly blame the woman. In a sea of beautiful people, Sabina definitely rose to the top. Sabina was in her prime. The small modeling agency she worked for kept her busy with catalog jobs. Still, her ultimate goal was to make it into high fashion as a runway model, and eventually into movies or television. She'd said she wasn't picky as long as she snatched a lead role. Sometimes Jamie had the crazy idea that Sabina was merely acting her way through their relationship. Jamie knew how Sabina hated campaign modeling, embarrassed to be seen in clothing sold by the big box stores like Walmart or Target. To her, they were low class. There was no way Jamie could get through this first night without a drink. Leaning in to whisper in Sabina's ear, she asked, "Do you want a drink?" Sabina offered her $1 million smile. Yeah, something light and refreshing would be great. A mojito? Perfect. You're too good to me, Sabina purred. I'm so great. Why do you refuse to consider marriage? Jamie thought, with not a small amount of bitterness. She had broached the topic on multiple occasions, but 8 months earlier, she had finally gathered the nerve to have a serious discussion, and Sabina had been blunt about her desire to focus on her career. It still stung 8 months later. Jamie pushed away from the small cocktail table and headed to the bar. After giving the bartender her order, she looked around at the twinkling fairy lights and muted lighting on the deck. The crew probably set everything up, so all the participants looked good on camera. Jamie hadn't wanted to wear what she considered a makeup overkill, but after signing the contract, she had no choice in the matter. Of course, she knew foundation existed. Sabina often expertly applied a base layer of makeup, but Jamie had never once slathered that on her face. On special occasions, she'd put on mascara. However, that was as far as she ever took it, preferring a more natural appearance. Caked on was the only way to describe what they'd done to her. All
All
right.
right. Thanks for two great readings, ladies.
That's my latest.
All right. Are you ready for some questions?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's roll. Reality television isn't a particularly popular trope. Certainly not like Ice Queens, Friends to Lovers, Fake Relationship, or Celebrity. What made you choose to write a story using reality TV as a backdrop? Nicole, we'll let you go first.
Wow. So in general, I don't really write for tropes. I just write what I write and then I publish it and hope that people read it. But for the most part, I write what I want to write. With this book, I mentioned again, like the old school real world and road rules, which is hard to say, real world. It's hard to say that, isn't it? Kind of enunciate.
Real world.
Real world. But I sort of get sometimes scenes in my mind. And I actually got a scene of a confessional and somebody talking to the camera about like their experience on a show. And I thought about how, especially nowadays, they would, as we talk about for ratings, they tend to cast these people who are going to give them the big ratings. So the loud people, the crazy people, the ones that are willing to do all sorts of stuff. And I thought about what if there was this just mild-mannered introvert who's sort of down on her luck, and she auditions thinking she's never going to get it. Her friend convinces her and she goes on. She doesn't really want to be there. So she closes herself off. She doesn't want the cameras around. She doesn't really want to talk to them. Kind of going up against a player in Dayton who is not only a player in relationships, but a player on the show. She's very well known. She's known for being this, loving to be in front of the camera, has her own YouTube channel, the whole thing, and how it would be kind of fun to play those two off of each other. So I didn't really write it because I was writing a reality TV show. I wrote it because the scene came to my mind and then the characters and then the story came from there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I already said what the reason why I wrote mine was because I just thought it would be very fun to do a book based on the show The Ultimatum, which was kind of interesting.
All right. Oh, I think we've touched on this a little bit about reality TV. Is it a guilty pleasure? And if so, which show? I think you both have demonstrated, the real world and
I don't think it's real, but yeah.
yeah, The Ultimate Demand is something that you've watched and enjoyed. Which reality television show do you think they would make an entirely sapphic version of?
I think Annette wrote the book for it, right?
Well, I mean, they already did do an
Oh,
entire
they actually
sapphic.
have one that
Yes,
is.
yes, The Ultimatum is the queer version is sapphic.
I
I
didn't
don't
know
know if
that.
they're going to do another one. I would
Yeah.
definitely watch it. I mean, it was seriously a guilty pleasure. I mean, the first one that I saw, I go, wow, this is an interesting premise. I've got to watch this, and I was sucked in. I was totally sucked in. Did you watch it, Ellie? Did you watch The Ultimatum? Did you ever catch any
I
of it?
think I have. I think I may have seen maybe one episode.
Oh my gosh, you'll get sucked in if you watch it. If you find it somewhere, Nicole, you should watch it. It's pretty
I'll
good.
look
Where
it
is
up.
it? Yeah, what channel is, or is it on a streamer?
It's got to be on one of the ones that I have. I'm guessing it was on either Netflix or I
I'll
also
look it up.
or
I
I
mean,
don't
I
know.
can Google.
Yeah,
I can
Google it
Google.
because the
But
ultimate
could you
interest is
imagine a sapphic version of Naked and Afraid or even Survivor?
yes,
I mean,
I think a Survivor, a sapphic version of Survivor would be fun. Would
A
be
yeah.
fun.
bunch of us building things and staying alive, and yeah, that'd be entertaining. I always like so the one show we actually got into probably a year or two ago, and there's so many seasons, so we were lucky, is The Amazing Race.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so we like to watch it and then say how we would never ever do those things. So it's nice to watch those people suffer through doing those things. But it would be really interesting to watch. There's usually like every now and then there's one kind of sapphic couple or, gay guys or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And it would be really funny to see 12 or 13 couples, sapphic couples kind of doing these competitions.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That would be.
I never watched Big Brother, but wasn't that like a bunch of college-aged kids hanging out or
never
something
watched it.
like
Mm-mm.
that?
I
They
didn't.
I know they have to live in a house and they can't leave the house or like they have to stay in that
Yeah.
area, but I couldn't tell you. I know they compete. I used to have employees who would talk to me about Big Bro. We were at a team building activity. I was like the mom in a minivan. I had six of them in the back. We're driving through, we think we were at Houston for this trip, and they're all talking about something. What are you talking about? They name these people like they are best friends with them, and it's Big Brother, Nicole. I'm like, I don't know which. I'm just gonna drive. Y'all keep talking.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I never watched it, so I don't know, but I'm guessing locking a bunch of sapphic people in a place
drama.
that'd be kind of interesting or drama.
Yeah,
Or what's
that'd be
the
fun.
other one that I don't I watched it once and it was oh my gosh. The wife swapping.
Oh, I remember that
Yeah.
was on ABC for a
Yeah.
while. I
Yeah,
remember
that
that one.
long time.
That's
Yeah,
creepy. It's a little
that'd be
creepy.
cre kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that wouldn't that be an interesting one too? That would be kind of similar to the ultimatum, only I don't know how long they were, and you get their kids and I mean, it was, and they always
I do
pick like,
not want someone else's children full time for
right?
like
No.
7
They always
days.
pick like opposites, these,
Yeah.
the one who's like a flowery free spirit and the other who's like, strict. And it
Hmm.
was
Drill sergeant. Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Anyways. All right.
All right. Nicole, it's
Hmm.
very apparent that you're a very prolific writer. What's your secret, especially since you also have a full-time job besides being a full-time writer?
I no longer have a full-time job, so that's not the secret, but that is just a statement of fact. I quit almost a little over a year ago. Yeah, I think February 28th of last year was
Oh,
or March 1st, I think. But I finally went full-time writing, but I was in training and development, and the probably actually literally the second half of my career was in tech and leading training departments. But I left. I was ready to go. We'll put it that way. But so now I'm a full-time writer. But I think usually when I get this question, because I actually have, I think it's 63. I just don't update my Amazon description because I put out a new book every month. But I think I have 63 books out at this point,
wow.
and
Wow.
another one comes out April. I have a 12 book series this year. So it's my secret is I write fast. It's not a secret. It's just for whatever reason, I was gifted the ability to write very quick. I type fast, but I was gifted the ability to write very quickly. My other secret, which is not a secret anymore either, my wife is in the office behind this office,
Mhm.
and she is my full-time editor, cover designer, business person extraordinaire, and she actually does the physical putting the books on Amazon, the formatting, all of that.
Mhm.
And so if she was not doing those things, obviously I would, pay somebody else to do those things, but I would not be able to publish as many books. So I do write more books than I publish because we publish at a certain pace, but we would not be able to keep up. So I think those are my two secrets. I'm able to write very quickly, so I'm grateful
Nice.
for that. And then, she's right behind me.
Nice
Oh,
to be married to
that-
an editor and formatter and all of that.
yeah.
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 I mean,
It's a lot of work.
these are all things that she learned. So,
Yeah.
whenever I get very nice emails and messages, whenever people say thank you for this book or that, I always try when I can to remind them that like I would not be publishing had Natalie not learn how to do all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I was working, so I was writing for me. She got to read the books,
Mhm.
and that's probably what we would have kept doing for a while. But she figured out how to do it, taught herself, and here we are.
Yeah.
That's amazing. She allows you to be the creative portion and
Yeah.
Yeah,
she handles the business end. That's fantastic.
she loves numbers. I do not.
Yes.
I like words,
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's a good balance.
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
So-
Congratulations on being a full-time writer, and I'm glad that you're
Thank you.
able
Yeah.
to do
So a
that.
book a month. Wow.
Book
This
a
year,
month.
yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
We normally do about between 6 to 8. It depends in a year. I wrote the series that's out now is the New Orleans series, and I got
It's
this
the
idea in my head.
January, February, March. Yeah.
March, April, May. Yeah, I was like,
I read
yeah, I was like, what?
January, February. Mhm.
I was like, what am I going to call them? And I got really lazy, and I thought, what if I just call them the months that they come out in? But it makes sense if obviously if you're reading them, you hopefully it makes
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, so we just decided to publish them on the second of every month this year. So this will be the most books. She's editing one now, so this will be the most books we've published in a year.
Good.
Now,
I'll have
does
to
she-
get March. I'll have to get March because
Yeah, it just came out about 6 days
Yeah.
ago. Yeah.
Does she edit as you go along, or does she wait till you finish the first draft? Or
Oh, no. So typically what'll happen is I write the first draft. She will read it just as a reader. So she's a big like night owl, so she'll read it at night a lot. And then she has her schedule. So we have the release schedule. So I could work on a book today that won't see the light of day for a bit, or I could work on a book today that just fits into the schedule. Obviously, this year's planned out, but maybe she's like, let's put this next year. And so she has her own editing schedule that's independent of my writing schedule. And when she hits that book, she starts. Usually, what she'll do is tell me I'm about to edit it, so you need to edit it. And then I do my editing, she does hers, it comes back to me. That's kind of how it goes.
that's really interesting.
yeah. I'm, I mean, I know this may sound like a stupid question, but why did you choose your very first book? Why did you choose for it to be a sapphic book? Versus
I don't think that's
something for a
yeah.
wider market that some people would choose,
No, that's I'm laughing because you're right. So I did this podcast that I'm going to Portland, the Queers and Quills convention, and they're doing a podcast for some of the authors. And he had the same question, and I think it's a good question to ask. For me, I've been writing since I was wee little. I mean, I remember I learned how to read. I started with my big pencil that we all had because we didn't have the hand-eye coordination. So we're
Yeah.
writing with our big pencils. I was writing little silly kid sentences. I can't call them stories, but I when I actually started writing short stories and novellas and novels, I was probably in like 7th grade to my freshman year of high school. They just kept getting longer. And then by my senior year, I'd written probably a couple like full-length novels that will literally never see the light of day. I just want to be clear about that. But I had such a hard time finishing stuff. So I would start something and I wouldn't finish it, start it, not finish it. I'd shove it away and I'd deal with it later. Sometimes I wouldn't come back to it. And what really happened was fan fiction.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
didn't, when I grew up, the term fan fiction, if it existed, I hadn't heard. I mean, I grew up when AOL, I'm an elder millennial, so AOL was, a thing. And I didn't know, I was writing stories based on TV shows that I watched and things, but I didn't know that's what it was called. As an adult, I had a boss at the time who, she's a lesbian, and she came into my office one day and said, I went down a fan fiction rabbit hole this weekend. And I was like, what is fan fiction? Again, I'm an adult. I have no idea what it is. And she told me this is when I was living in LA and she knew a lot of actors and stuff. And a friend of hers was an actor on I won't name them, but on a TV show at the time. And she had gone down her own rabbit hole of fan fiction written about her with another female character on the show. So we were talking about that and I thought, let me give it a try. I then, of course, as we all do, it's the national pastime. You go down your own fanfic rabbit hole. And what I started to read was Glee fan fiction because Glee was super popular.
Right.
And I got an idea for my own. And so it was Quintana, which is Santana and Quinn. And I decided to be brave and post it. And so that was probably one of the first things I legitimately finished. So it was sapphic romance. And then I posted some more. Then I posted a few Clexa stories from the 100.
Yeah.
My wife she's Ukrainian, so she was in Ukraine. She read my Quintana, then she read my Clexa. And that's how we met. We started talking about these
Wow.
stories that I had
Wow.
written. And then, fast forward, we're now long distance dating. And I got an idea for the first original novel that I wrote, which was Fresh Start. And I started typing and I would send her chapters. So like it was my night, her morning, vice versa. So I'd send her chapters and she would read them on the way to work or when she would get home. And she liked it. When she moved over here, that's kind of how the publishing started. She needed a job. Like she's
Yeah.
moving from a different country. She
Yeah.
didn't have a job here. And so she said, what if I learn how to publish your books? And at that point, I'd probably written 6 or 7. And so she started doing that. And that's why if you look, which I don't think anybody cares, but if you look, you'll see that plus all the love songs, they were published 2 days apart. It's because they were already written. So
Uh-huh.
we were able to publish them back
Yeah.
to back. But yeah, long story. But I
Interesting.
don't
Wow.
think I don't think I chose it. I think it
It
chose
chose.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Fanfic. I never heard about fanfic until after I was writing. So I
Right.
didn't get my start in fanfic because
Mm,
I didn't know it existed.
yeah.
Right.
But our publishers, one who's since passed, they started, Julie started in fanfic, and so did
Yeah. It's very interesting. Very
yeah.
interesting. So it sounds like you pretty much you sit down and you write a complete book. Do you
Yeah.
ever find yourself working on multiple books at one time?
Yeah.
No. I think I could do it. Yes, I've tried once. Did I enjoy it as much? No. I like writing just one book all the way through. I can finish, it depends on the book, how long it is, how complicated, but I'll usually finish a first draft of a book between, if I'm being honest, 10 to 14 days. 14 is on the long
What do
side.
you like write all day long? Like how many words a day do you write?
Usually about 10K.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you
Okay.
if I'm writing about a 92K to a 95K book, if you divide that. So it depends. When I was working, I would start my day by writing a chapter, and then I would finish my day by writing a few chapters. So it now I don't have to bookend it because I am uh, full time now, so I can actually write as much or as little as I want. And then I do all the marketing now. I do all the social media. I've taken on other tasks because
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like I'll write a chapter, I'll take a break, do something there, write another chapter, take a break. So that's kind of how I do it.
Wow.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. What advice would you give to new authors on breaking into the sapphic market?
Oof.
Especially now. I mean,
I was gonna say it's a complicated time.
it's a complicated time. It
Yeah.
is a complicated
Yeah.
time.
Um, excuse me. I think there's a couple, well, there's a lot. If I scroll. So I feel like I got really lucky because the end of 2017, when we first started publishing, there was less competition. There were fewer people
Yeah.
publishing. I was just talking just yesterday to my wife. You used to be able to sort of like, again, I publish a lot. So you used to be able to pick your release date and not really worry about anybody who's, going to be right up in there with you. And now you can't. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's a great thing because it means more people are publishing, more people are
Sure,
telling
yeah.
stories. That's what we want. So I'm definitely not mad about that. But if you're just starting, what that means is it's harder to break into that. It might be harder to get that first. I got lucky. All the Love Songs was a breakout book for me. And again, I published it 2 days after my first. There was a lot less going on back then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think I'm going to not talk anything political, anything that's going on with Amazon or any of that, and just kind of in general. I think if I were giving somebody advice, I would say get all your ducks in a row because it's not just writing. Really have the understand. I'm talking self-published here, so I don't have my wife is my boss, right? But like I don't have a publisher,
Right.
I don't have an edit, I don't have that traditional kind of setup. And so for me, when we were starting out, we had to learn a lot, but we also had to figure out, do you get an LLC or not?
Yeah.
How are you protected? Like, did we got a business banking account? Like things that you don't think about. We probably did it all wrong because there wasn't as much available or out there. We didn't have a Twitter when we first, I will still call it Twitter, when we first started. I got on Instagram like last year or the year before. Like
Yeah.
we weren't really doing probably all the right social. I'm not on TikTok. I will never be on TikTok. So like we probably weren't doing all the right things. But I would say understand it's a lot more than writing. you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And so
Right.
if you really put into the time kind of building up your brand and building up the business and having that understanding, you'll get to live your passion. Like you'll get to write your book and publish your book and people will get to read and enjoy your book. But it's not just release the book and then you're done. You two know that. Like there's
Yeah.
a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, there's a lot more of, yeah, there's a lot of the social media, the promotion stuff, more than I care to admit that there is, because,
Yeah.
as a writer, you really rather focus your energy on writing, but
Yeah.
you really can't. You're right. You really
Yeah.
can't just focus on writing.
Yeah.
All right. We've talked about writing experience and challengings. What is the most important lesson you've learned after writing so many novels?
I don't, there's a few, there's lots, but sometimes I have my own expectations for how a book is going to do. And what I have learned over the years is that when I think a book is going to do incredibly well, I am probably wrong. And when a
Yes.
book is not going to do
Yes.
very well,
Yeah.
I am wrong. Books
Yeah.
surprise me. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson is I really try at this point level set what are your expectations? People are going to read it. That's my expectation. Like hopefully somebody's going to read it because I've had a lot of I've allowed myself to get disappointed because I thought this book's amazing, everybody's going to love it. In particular in my subgenres, you two both write in sort of various
Yeah, yeah.
subgenres as well. And it's so interesting because I wrote a book called Echoes, which is paranormal romance, and I love this book. I'm like, this book is awesome. It's kind of like a Torchwood vibe to it with a little bit of this. And then I put it out there and people bought it, but I thought it would be cooler than it was. And I also had to be aware of the timing of it. It came out right before the election, which was probably a bad time to release a book.
Yeah.
Not even because of what happened in the election. Everybody's so worried. Everybody was so
Yeah,
terrified here
yeah.
of what was going to, I don't think a lot of people were, yeah, let me buy a bunch of books. So there are going to be those things outside of my control. I literally picked that date a year or two in advance. So it is what it is. And you just have to go with it. But yeah, I would say sometimes I think a book's going to kill it. And other times I don't know how this book did so well because I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. I've still not
Yeah.
figured that out. I haven't
Yeah.
figured out
If
what
you do, let me know.
Yeah.
I know. What's the secret with some books doing really well
Yeah.
and others not? Same thing, there are some books that are, I tend to write the quirkier novels anyway, so I've got that quirky bent. But there are some that I just think are such a cool idea, and but if they're not, sort of traditional romance, I think those
Yeah.
don't do as well, but they're not as fun for me
100,
personally.
100%.
The
Yeah.
romance is not as fun to write as the ones that are, I mean, Allie and we've had lots of discussions on this. I really like writing those different kinds in the subgenres. It's not that I don't enjoy romance. I love reading it. I do like writing it, but it's not the only genre I like writing in.
I think again, my wife and we've been talking a lot about books recently, as one could imagine. We were talking about this the other day, and sometimes I'll see authors in different, especially in subgenres, like spec fic is one of them, which I've
Yeah.
written
Mhm.
in, and
Yep.
sci-fi in general,
Yep.
paranormal, obviously.
Yep.
Um, I think what we've tried to learn is I love writing those books. So I'm not going to stop writing them. I'm going to write them however
Right.
I want to
Right.
write them.
Yep.
But what we
Right.
have to do and maybe this is advice for somebody, first of all, understand your expectations. Romance is the top selling genre on the planet. So if you're not writing romance, maybe your money expectations. If you're writing a story about, less than 1%, 1%, 1% of, something that people can relate to, or are interested in, or whatever the case may be, you may struggle to hit those numbers if you have these expectations that are really up here. What we do is we bookend or we cushion. And so, if I'm putting some type of spec fic book that I'm not quite sure, like it could do great, it could do terribly, I will bookend that with a book that I am pretty sure. So contemporary romance here, contemporary romance there. And that way, as far as money goes, as far as sales goes, there's a book that I can still put out that I enjoy. So I just won't put them all out at once, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Yeah.
And we plan for that now. We didn't get that in the beginning, but we plan for that now.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
love that you don't write for tropes.
Mm-mm.
You write what inspires you.
Yeah.
And that's excellent to hear. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people get so caught up in, writing for the ice queens and different things, and it's just like, that's something I don't think Annette and I can ever really do.
Exactly. I don't know how to
Whatever
write an
comes
ice
in,
queen,
yeah,
it just
whatever
doesn't.
comes into the head is what comes out on paper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, I probably have Ice Queen characters. I think I've had one, but it wasn't, I mean, she was a main character, but she was the villain. Yeah,
Yeah.
But it was
I've never
also
been
just
able,
because that's what entered your brain to write. You weren't writing it because you were trying to write an Ice Queen novel. And
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that to me if people want to do that, especially if that's your shtick. If your whole shtick is writing Ice Queens or Friends to Lovers or Second Chance, like that's totally cool.
yeah,
I tend to write the book and then I literally go, okay, I have to market it.
yeah. Where does it
And
go?
so where
Yeah,
does it go? So how do
Yeah.
because the tricky thing that I don't think people talk to you about book marketing is you almost have to tell people don't read this book as much as you have to tell them to read it. Because if they're going to read a book that let's say you tell them this is super low angst book and it's very high on the angst side, and they rate and review your book, they feel misled, and you've done a poor job of marketing it, but you're going to get a lot of upset people. So you almost have to tell people this is not your books. Like March is an insta love book. And there's a lot of hatred for insta love. There are a lot of people out there who are like, I don't like insta love stories, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what the premise of the book is. And so I'm very clear about that. If you are not a fan of this, you should not read this book. Like wait
right,
for April. April's a friends to lovers book. And so
right. Yeah.
trying to market, that's when I'm like, okay, what happens here? Like what kind of tropes? And then how do I put that on a Canva? I love my Canva. I spend way too much time in Canva, but like how can I put that on a card, post that on the internet, and hope the right people kind of buy the book? And some people take a chance on it. Maybe they don't like Insta but they like my books.
Right.
So maybe they'll
Right.
take a chance.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I did notice, that's the other thing, the whole miscommunication, conflict kind of thing, uh, that could be
The
settled
act
with,
breakups.
a
Yeah.
quick conversation or whatever. I noticed that in Reality Check. It's like you had some conflict and tension, but you didn't like drag it out. It was like, oh my God, thank God they didn't like have this,
Yeah.
she saw her talking to her ex and, it was a big thing and they break up for 6 months because, I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's so great, that you didn't do that. I mean, um, because I think that gets tired. Yeah.
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 I think I grew up watching TV shows where they do that all the time. And it drives me crazy. So somebody will come over, we need to talk. Absolutely not. We cannot talk. And then they don't talk for a week and a half and they see each other constantly, but they don't have this important conversation or they get interrupted or yeah, they see somebody trying to kiss their significant other and just close the door and walk away. And I'm like, nobody does that.
Right.
No, literally nobody is going to go, oh, I'll just walk away while I saw somebody try to kiss you. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I tend not to use miscommunication. I tend not to use third act breakups. They might break up,
Right.
but there's a reason for it. And I try to make those reasons as realistic as humanly possible. That to me is the most important part about conflict and tension. It has to feel real. It has to feel believable. If it doesn't, it's not tension. It's not conflict.
Yeah.
And so to me, I use what not even necessarily a plot device. It's just what makes sense for these characters. What would they fight about right now? What are they dealing with in their lives? Is one, getting a job in another part of the country and they've got to make a tough decision about what to do there. And that's a very realistic conversation that people today have to have. And then I try to treat it realistically. I don't say, I'm never talking to you again. Of course we would talk. So that's
That's
important
kind
to
of
me.
how you engineer conflicts and complications is you base them on more realistic things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, except for like a paranormal or a time traveling lesbian
right.
book.
Right,
I mean,
'cause
as
you
far
can
as I
do
know,
whatever,
those
right?
things aren't real. Right. I can do whatever I want there. But I mean, literally, conflict you're dealing with in Future Wife is that one of them invented a time machine and it's dangerous. So I don't
Yes,
know that
I read
that's
that.
super realistic. Thank you. I don't know if that's super realistic, but yeah, in general.
I thought that was a very interesting book. In
Thank you.
fact, I think that's probably, I read that and that inspired me to, I don't know if I'll ever finish it, but that's inspired me to write a time travel book.
Ooh,
So
cool.
I started it. I have about 10,000 words and I don't know if I'm going to finish it or not, but,
It's
I
super
just thought
fun.
it was a very interesting, concept is time travel, because I've always been fascinated by the whole chicken versus egg thing in the Terminator and that whole
Yeah.
time travel. What a fascinating
Yeah. I
storyline
mean, we're
there.
living Terminator right now,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's pretty
Yeah,
much or it will be soon at least. We're in Skynet, so
right.
yeah.
So I just thought that was that was it was an interesting premise, sort of, you know, this future person who they've got to take care of. And then the guy who comes back to save her is the father. I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
just all that convoluted, interesting stuff. Yeah. And it's
All right. Um, so how much research do you do for your books?
It depends on the book. So maybe I'll give an example. So like for a regular contemporary romance, not much. I don't have to. I might look up if I give them a job I don't know a ton about. I'll obviously look up stuff like that. I'll ask somebody who does that job, is this real, not real, or what term would you, something like that.
yeah, sure.
Um, when I'm writing something, it's like Timeless that came out, which is a reincarnation book and has this couple reincarnated from 1500s on. I was looking up things that I probably should know, but when was popcorn invented?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
It's been a minute. So popcorn's been around forever, but I was writing about two characters in the 40s and I wanted to know how do they make popcorn? In that book also like where does honeysuckle grow? I needed to know that because it's very important to the story. And so there was a lot of that. I would say for Future Wife, it was a lot of research. It was literally looking up, is time travel possible and how? And what metal is like the strongest metal that I could possibly make work on a time machine? And what would that time machine look like? It was also, there's like a science prize in there that she's eligible for. So I had to look up how some of that stuff works. And I'm just saving tabs and bookmarking. And I outline in my notes app. So a lot of times I'm just copying, pasting that research in so that when it's relevant, I can scroll down and
yeah.
look back. But yeah, that kind of stuff. But on average, not too much. It just depends.
Did it look like Doctor Who's TARDIS?
I did not. So I actually made it. Not in real life, to be clear. I do not possess a time machine. If I did, we would be in a different timeline right now. If I just that's how you know nobody has a time machine. We would be in a different timeline. But what I sketched it. I used Canva. I found different images and kind of cobbled it together. If anybody watched the show I think it was called Timeless. But if anybody watched the show Timeless, it was similar to that. Not a giant ball. It's open. So it did look like that. But I actually wrote it because of the Taylor Swift song Timeless, not because of the TV show. So it's actually based on those lyrics, which
The
is the first
TV
time I've
show
done that.
was a BBC show?
No, Timeless
No?
was NBC. You can see, I want to say it's on one of the streamers. I think it's Amazon. Amazon Prime probably has it. But it was on for a couple of seasons. So it was sort of a take on if you could, somebody's trying to destroy the timeline. And so this good group of people, like with the historian, goes to these different, and I'm a history nerd. So watching her go to these different historical events was really, really cool for me. So.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Legends of have you watched that TV show Legends
Of
of?
the Hidden Temple? I'm talking about,
No, it's
no, that's like a good old Nickelodeon show.
no, it's a DC. They're DC comic characters. Legends.
Oh, Legends of Tomorrow. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
Love
what you're
that.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about personal experiences? How much of your personal experiences become part of your books?
So I think in terms of places I've been or have lived, there's a lot of that. So like I wrote the Chicago series because I'm from Indiana. I've been to Chicago a lot. I lived in Boston. I lived in the Bay Area. So I wrote the San Francisco series. I've been to Tahoe. But I've traveled. So like Love Forged has a lot of different places in Europe that I've been to. So a lot of that is in there. For the most part, I don't tend to write about personal experiences, like little inside jokes and stuff, primarily that like my wife can read and laugh about later. But yeah, it's usually I love New Orleans. I've been there 6 times. I've probably spent a total of a couple of months there. I had a friend who lived there, so I stayed with her a few times. So I got the local feel and the tourism feel, and I love that place. It feels to me like really nowhere else on earth. And so when I was thinking about where am I going to put my next Friend Connected series, I know it well enough, and it saves me from having to do a ton of research because I'm very familiar with it. But I would say that's probably for the most part just locations I've been that I'm familiar with.
Okay. Do you plan on ever doing anything paranormal in the New Orleans area?
Uh, Meaning like write a paranormal book about New Orleans?
Yeah.
I don't have any plans to, no. So I actually have a fortune teller that appears. It's about as paranormal as it gets, but she shows up in each book and she's sort of pretty gifted and kind of gives them little hints and stuff. But I think the only true paranormal that I've written, which is also a side of sci-fi, is Echo. So I don't know. I might write that down to work on later.
Yes, I mean it's got such a history for
Yeah.
paranormal.
It does,
know?
yeah.
I went on a ghost tour once. Oh my God, it was so much fun. It was led by
Yeah.
this, I think she was like 80-year-old woman named Scary Mary. I actually put her in one of the books, but she was hilarious. It was like a ghost vampire something tour. Anyway, we walked around and she's woo, doing all the fun voices and we're all taking pictures and she's like, show me your ghosts on your camera, and just made it a blast. But she's also teaching the historical, like there's truth
Right.
to what she's talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a lot
I've
of
been on
fun.
several. They're fun.
Yeah, they're great.
What about a current book? What are you working on right this second?
I don't know that I can tell you because I don't know when it will come out. So like I'm probably like we have a release schedule planned for next year. We're pretty like we're soft, but we're pretty sure what 2027 is going to look like and maybe into 2028.
Wow.
So
Oh.
yeah, I'm working on a contemporary romance. I can tell you it's got an age gap in it. Musician kind of vibe to it. But yeah, I never know when the books are going to come out. So I don't, it's hard for me. So when people post their like work in progress, I never do because I'm really far ahead. It's not like I'm working on the book that's going to come out next month, you know?
That's amazing.
Pantser or plotter?
Both. I'm in the middle. I started as a full-on pantser, which is why some of my books in the beginning have a lot of pacing issues that I wish I could change now. But I started not outlining at all. I got to a point where I needed to improve my process. My process was basically I wrote all the love songs first, and the couple in there, Danny and Peyton, people really wanted a book about them, but their romance happens first. So I had to write my first prequel, which is still the only prequel I've ever written. But I was having a hard time doing it. And so I literally had to reread all the love songs. I turned the events of that book into an outline and then made the outline from that outline. And from that point on, I've outlined, but my outline is pretty open. It's like one bullet point per chapter. It's like these 1, 2, or 3 things happen. And it's from this person's perspective. And then I put that on my notes app and I will change it. I've changed a bunch. So sometimes I'll change 20, 30, 40%. Other times I'll just go, this is great. This is what I want to write. Once I get to know the characters, they do what they want. So
Yeah. Good. All right. Anything else that you would like to share with us or the readers? It's been a pleasure getting to know you and
thank you. It's nice to get to know both of you.
yeah, and hearing what your process is. And my gosh, to be able to write that far ahead, that's awesome.
I think so it's a blessing and a curse because there are books that I wish could come out tomorrow. Like I wish I could publish all my books right now. You know what I mean? Like you write it, you get so excited.
Yeah.
And you want people to read it. Or sometimes I'll see, Jay has her book bingo or I Heart Sapphic will have their thing. And I'm like, oh, I have a book for that.
Yeah. but it's not
but it's
coming
not out
till,
yet.
till
Yeah.
2026.
We're like, yeah, it's not out yet, so I can't mention it. So obviously, it's much more blessing than curse. I joke, but yeah, I'm glad that I can do that and that we are pretty far ahead as far as like what's written. It also means that if there are a couple books that aren't ready, I'm not proud of, I want to still work on, I need to, hang on to them for a bit. I have lots of space, so I can do that. So there might be a book where I'm just like, I like it, I wrote it, it's good, but I need to pep it up a little bit before I feel like it's ready for publication. So.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It has really been a joy talking with you, Nicole. It was interesting. Like I said, I've read a number of your books. I don't think I've read all 80 of them.
There's not 80, the only 60. Oh no,
Okay,
I think it's
60.
64. Hold on.
64. I have read quite a bit of them, but not all 64. And I'm sad to say that I'm now going to have to go back and look at some of those, like your paranormal and the ones that aren't contemporary romance, because I actually personally love reading those kind of books. They're a breath of fresh air for me, because there's so much romance out there and not as much of the sci-fi or the paranormal or some of the more interesting books that that go off on have that aren't necessarily the formulaic kind of book that it's more interesting to me. So I'll have
You
to
know what
check
I'm
this out.
you know what I do is because I write so many books, I could write 4 or 5 romances and then go, I need a break.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like, oh, what else has been popping around in my head? And maybe
Sure.
that's the paranormal or time travel or something. And then I give myself a breather as a writer too. So I get it.
Yeah. Great. Well, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. Next month, next month we'll be talking about cats, dogs, pets, farms, fun animals, because Allie's fairy tale farm comes out in April, and so having a book about pets is going to be super, super fun. And that's it. Unless anybody else, anything else to say.
No, again, thank you for joining us,
Thank you.
Nicole.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's been awesome.